Throughout history, mankind has embarked on a relentless quest to make things smaller. From cell phones to computers, soda cans to candy bars, and everything in between. If it exists, then we've probably tried to shrink it. And nowhere is this obsession more evident than in the world of firearms. Enter the B&T TP9, the smallest subgun on Earth. The TP9 is so compact that if James Bond and John Wick had a baby, this would be its first birthday gift. It's like someone looked at a full-size SMG and thought, that's cool, but what if I could fit it in a fanny pack? But here's the kicker. The TP9 was originally designed in the 80s, the same era that brought us huge hair, huge shoulder pads, and huge ghetto blasters, also gave us one of the tiniest and most futuristic subguns ever made. And while everything else in the 80s was getting bigger, the engineers at Strayer Arms were doing the opposite. And little did they know that the gun that they were creating would hold the smallest submachine gun title for decades to come. Fast forward to today, the TP9 is still the reigning champ of compact firepower. It's the ultimate proof that good things really do come in small packages, especially when those packages fire 9mm at an alarming rate. Today, I'm going to delve into all things TP9, the history, the evolution, and the future. Without further ado, the B&T TP9, the smallest subgun on Earth. Okay, since the MP9 and the TP9 are not originally B&T designs, I'm going to start off with the history of the platform. The B&T TP9 is a semi-automatic commercial variant of the MP9. Respectively, both are reincarnations of the Strayer TMP, the tactical machine pistol, and the Strayer SPP, the special purpose pistol. The Strayer TMP was first designed in 1989 by Friedrich Egner, and production of the TMP ran from 1992 all the way until 2001. There isn't much information regarding how and why B&T acquired the TMP patent from Strayer. All we know is that it happened in 2001. I can only speculate at this point, but I do remember when Chris TDI first released the Vector, they said how expensive it was to produce a platform and a reliable magazine at the same time, and that's why they used the Glock magazine. So I kind of have a feeling that maybe B&T was planning on making some platforms and they just wanted the magazine design. Just speculation. But it does make sense because all the B&T platforms do use that proprietary magazine that was acquired from the Strayer TMP patent. When compared side by side, the B&T and the Strayer platforms look nearly identical, except for a few minor changes that were made by B&T. These include a stock that folds to the right and lines up with the vertical grip, an integrated Picatinny rail on the right side of the platform, and a new Glock-style trigger safety, along with a different mounting shroud for suppressors. B&T started producing the TP9 and the MP9 almost immediately after buying the patent off of Strayer. Although B&T was manufacturing the TP9 and owned the patent, the first TP9s weren't imported by B&T. The first TP9s were imported by DS Arms. They'd seen some success importing FN FAL rifles, and they saw potential for the TP9 in the US market. But instead of sourcing the TP9 directly from B&T, DS Arms chose to import the TP9 from SUBGUN, a Turkish manufacturer that produces a very similar MP9 TP9 at a lower cost. Essentially, a knockoff TP9. DSA had likely established a strong import partnership with SUBGUN, making it easier and more streamlined to bring in the TP9 to the US through them. In turn, this made it easier for B&T to import the TP9 to the US. This is kind of why the discrepancies in the earlier models of TP9s exist. Some have the threaded barrel, some have kind of like an ump-style shroud, some of them have the shroud that you know today with the locking lugs, some of them didn't come with a side rail, and some of them came with an aluminum side rail. And although the TP9 wasn't imported until 2004, the earliest serial I've ever seen on a TP9 was 2003. And it's not cut and dry. I've even seen the DSA logo embossed on a TP9 that also had the B&T logo, which leads me to believe that DSA also imported actual B&T TP9s. I know I've seen those in Canada. Aside from having a pre-2004 serial number, a DSA imported TP9 is pretty much indistinguishable other than the embossed logo on the upper cover. The original Gen 1 TP9 was given the US denomination. This might just be a US and Canadian model thing, I have no idea because I've only experienced those models. And due to US SBR laws, some TP9s didn't have the foregrip in front and they included a 1913 rail at 6 o'clock instead. I've heard people call this the TP9N, but that's actually not true because both the N and the US came with the Picatinny rail at 6 o'clock. The deciding factor being if it was imported as a pistol or as a SBR. Okay, now I'm going to do a brief rundown of the TP9 for those who aren't privy to the platform. The TP9 is essentially the civilian semi-automatic version of the Select Fire MP9. It features a rotating locking bolt design that operates using a direct blowback, 80% of its construction being made of an advanced polymer composite material. Because of this, the TP9 tips the scales at an astonishing 3.1 pounds unloaded. With a length of just 11.1 inches collapsed and an overall length of 20.6 inches with the stock extended, the TP9 is the smallest subgun offering from B&T in 9mm. With a 5.1-inch cold hammer forged barrel and a proprietary suppressor mounting system that allows the barrel assembly to rotate. The TP9 has a rear AR-style charge handle and a sliding trigger with a Glock-style trigger safety equipped. It has a 1913 rail spanning nearly the entire length of the top rail minus the primitive but usable integrated iron sights, and the TP9 also has a side rail at 3 o'clock, perfect for mounting lights and lasers, although some lasers and lights will not fit due to the stock. As of now, there's only 2 generations currently available of the TP9. Both are relatively the same, but a few minor differences can be easily spotted from the outside of the gun. So now I'm just going to take a little bit of time to show you those differences. First off, the TP9 Gen 1 is a TP9-US, and the Gen 2 is a TP9-N. To kick off the side-by-side comparison, I'm going to start with the biggest and most obvious things first. On a Gen 1, you have a crossblock style safety, and on a Gen 2, you have an HK style selector switch. Basically, on a Gen 1 MP9, it's a progressive trigger. You pull it a little bit, it's semi-automatic. You pull it all the way, it's fully automatic, compared to the Gen 2 that has a safety selector switch with a fully auto position. The Gen 1 has a nitride-coated bolt that is black, and the TP9N has a nickel stainless-coated bolt that is gray in color. There's also some minor differences in the construction and the roll pin placement if you look at them side by side. The Gen 1 TP9 has a smaller charge handle, both in length and width. Both aren't great, but the Gen 1 is a lot easier to pinch your fingers with. The Gen 1 has a non-ambi magazine release on the right side, where the TP9 has a small but updated ambi magazine release. Although the bolt release is not ambi on either generation, the Gen 2 does have a slightly elongated lever. And you learn something new every day, because as I was filming this video, I noticed 3 small differences between these 2 platforms, the Gen 1 and the Gen 2. The Gen 1 has a slightly shorter recoil spring. The Gen 1 also doesn't have this little notch cut out of the shroud for taking the takedown tab out. And the last thing that I noticed is that the Gen 1 doesn't have 2 of these grooves for rotating the bolt. It only has 1. As far as I know, that's the only external differences other than the model labels. There is some slight molding differences in the polymer clamshells, but even the texture is really similar. Internally, there are some differences related to how the safety interacts with the trigger assembly. I'm going to pull up a side-by-side as of writing this and recording this. I cannot remember the differences. I'll just pull it up. I actually noticed this little spring-loaded plunger here on the back of the Gen 2 bolt. I'm not really sure what this has to do with. I'm assuming it might have to do with the safety selector style. Okay, now I'm going to get into takedown. Both the TP9 models field strip exactly the same way. First, start by ensuring that the gun is unloaded by removing the magazine and cycling the action a couple times, and then visually inspect the chamber to make sure it's not loaded. Once you verify that the chamber is empty, then pull the trigger, because you don't want the action cocked during takedown. Now pull the 2 Glock-style takedown levers downwards to unclick the trunnion from the trunnion guides. To start field strip, depress the small button on the back of the top cover under the iron sight and the tab on the front of the top cover above the muzzle shroud, while simultaneously wiggling the top cover from the lower. There's 2 trunnion guides that secure the trunnion to the action of the gun. The tolerances are very tight, so wiggling helps this slide free. Ensure the barrel and the action remain inside the top cover. I usually turn the whole gun upside down while doing this and let gravity do the work. The action is like 90% of the weight of the gun, so turning it upside down really seems to help. To take the action out of the top cover, pull the front takedown tab backwards until the action disengages from the top cover. The bolt is being held in the top cover by spring tension, so once it's disengaged from the front of the cover, you just have to pull it up and forward, and then the spring will slide out the back of the bolt. Both the recoil spring and the spring guide can both be removed from the top cover. Once the action is removed from the top cover, the bolt simply pulls off the back of the barrel assembly. You might have to clock it a couple degrees because there are locking lugs that will hold it in place. The rotating barrel assembly comes apart by pushing the tab above the muzzle shroud in with enough pressure to compress the torsion spring inward. Once the torsion spring is fully compressed, the retaining lug will slide out from the top of the trunnion, and now the barrel will slide out from the front of the barrel shroud. If you want to completely remove the takedown tab out of the trunnion, the torsion spring can sometimes be a bit of a pain to reinstall. Sometimes I need to pull my second TP9 out just to verify I'm putting it in the right way, so make sure you check the orientation before you take it out. And I would recommend cleaning this takedown tab, because on my TP9N, which I got used, the tab was a little bit corroded. I'm assuming that the first owner just didn't do a really good cleaning or just didn't take it out. And while we're on the topic of taking the takedown tab out, Say that 5 times fast. I would recommend getting another torsion spring because these things are really flimsy and small. You could lose it, you could break it, you could bend it. So it's probably a good thing to have a spare. And while we're on the trunnion portion of the TP9, I'm going to show you one of the most interesting things about the whole platform, and that is how it makes the barrel rotate. You'll notice that on both sides of the barrel, there's these flat channels machined into it that kind of hook around the barrel clockwise. One of these channels indexes with the bottom of the retaining lug, and the force of the bolt traveling backwards when fired is what causes the barrel to rotate. I'm assuming there's 2 channels machined into the barrel so that it can be clocked 90 degrees and ran upside down in case one channel becomes worn out or messed up. And if you're wondering why the serial number is upside down after reassembly, you just need to clock the barrel 90 degrees to the other channel. Okay, now let's get to reassembly. Place the takedown tab into the slot on the trunnion with the side labeled up on the top side. Give it a wiggle and it should slide right into the slot. Ensure the torsion spring remains inside the tab and that it's springing out when it's compressed. First, take the barrel and slide it into the front of the shroud trunnion assembly, ensuring that the muzzle side is facing the front and the chamber side is facing the back. Clock the barrel until the retaining lug hole and channel on the barrel line up. At this point, you can check if the serial number is right side up. If it isn't, you can clock it 90 degrees. Insert the retaining lug into the hole while the tab is completely depressed, and it should just pop right into place. Then you want to verify that it's actually being held into the trunnion and also that it's rotating by pulling the barrel in and out, and you'll actually see it rotate. Now, insert the chamber side of the barrel into the side of the bolt that has the hole in the locking grooves. The top side of the bolt is the side with the slot that interacts with the charge handle. Once you have the bolt on the barrel, push them all the way together and then align the top of the barrel with the top of the bolt. Then turn the action upside down and slide it onto the recoil spring and guide until the front takedown tab locks into the top cover. Take the lower and align the trunnion guides with the slot on the trunnion, and with a little bit of wiggling, push the 2 covers together while depressing the rear takedown button. You should hear an audible click. Check that it's working by cycling the action. This is the one problem that sometimes you might encounter, is the action won't want to cycle. Sometimes after reassembly, the bolt is actually clocked like a ½ degree out of whack, and therefore it won't cycle. The way to fix this is either just to take the top cover off the lower again and then try again, or else you can cock the gun with the charge handle while pushing on the bottom of the bolt. I usually just separate the top cover by ½ inch and then I try again. I'm going to try and replicate this problem if I can. This seems to go away the more you take it apart and put it back together. I haven't had it happen to me in a long time, so I'll see if I can get it to happen. So that pretty much wraps up the takedown and reassembly of the TP9. Now I'm just going to get into the evolution of the TP9. As you guys have probably heard, there's a TP9 Pro that's just been released, which is pretty exciting. Sorry, not released, but teased. The TP9 Pro has been teased with dual side-folding charge handles like an APC9 or an APC9K. It has a QD port in the back of an all-aluminum upper receiver. It has M-LOK up front, along with a higher rail with a sunken acro slot because they had to clear those charge handles on top. They had to change the bolt so it would work with the new charge handle design. And last but not least, the trigger was updated to a flat-faced titanium trigger with a shorter reset and a lighter trigger pull. I will admit that I wasn't super keen on every change that B&T made, but I'll also admit that it has been growing on me. If the government is changed to a conservative government and I can buy the TP9 Pro, you bet that I will probably get one. That pretty much wraps up my TP9 video for today. If you guys are liking the content, please give me a like and subscribe. Thanks to my 150 subscribers. And let me know in the comments if you'd rather watch these videos with no music, because I'm thinking about re-uploading these videos in another playlist, a no music playlist, for those who don't enjoy the music. And if you can't get enough of the B&T content, then make sure you check out this video here, 5 reasons why you should get the APC9K over the APC9 Pro. Until next time, peace.